hey, I want to give my bit on a lot of things. But first and foremost, I want to apologize for being away so long. I think it's going on 6 or 7 months. And I can give a list of excuses a mile long, but suffice it to say that work and family have had priority during this time and just couldn't really get away from many of those things involved with the two. From having in-laws and so much work on my plate and things like that, just could not find the time. But I am back, so I'm happy to be back and make some new videos for this year. Before I even get to all the new videos though, I've had so many PMs and messages, emails and things asking me about my opinion dating to things 6 or 7 months ago. So this video is going to be a real quick response to some of those questions and emails that I can try to get out and perhaps get into further detail with newer videos this year. The first message or question that I got, which is the oldest, was asking me about when iTunes was changed, having the 3 buttons here and there, and then getting into complaints about iTunes on Windows and things like that. I am neither a big fan of iTunes or do I hate iTunes. iTunes is the store that I go to buy all my music. I'll just put 99%. I do buy some music from Amazon, but then I put it pretty much into my iTunes library. And I do have like my own kind of unique networking schema where I have backup storage, where I do have a network location where all my music is stored as their files. Because I do play, which is odd, all of my music on my Zune. I do prefer the Zune HD to the iPods. Period. I use the Zune HD as my primary, I guess, mobile device or music device to connect to my media center and television. And when company arrives, I just plug it in, and I like the performance, the look, the aesthetics, many things I don't want to get into much detail about over the iPod. But oddly enough, I buy everything through the iTunes store. I don't like the point system of the Zune Marketplace and things like that, although you can buy music with cash, but you still have to buy the credits and things like that. I've experimented with it, don't like it, so I pretty much stick with iTunes. I'm not bothered with the new look. Is it something that we're going to see in Lion? Maybe. Okay, they've found ways to change up the buttons. Okay, whatever. I kind of just roll with the punches on that. As far as Windows is concerned, a lot of Apple things that I've had over the years have been buggy or slow and things like that. I've read like articles where they think it's conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. My answer to that is that iTunes is still written in C or is a Carbon-based API. As far to my knowledge, I think they're planning to make a Cocoa-based iTunes, but then they would have to make something unique for the Microsoft side of things, because it either have to be ported. So right now it stays in likely C or C+, and it goes against the grain of what Jobs pretty much said, making it a really hypocritical statement, saying, he's not going to allow third-party compiled code to go into certain APIs and ecosystem of the Apple environment, but iTunes is used as being cross-compiled to run on Windows, and perhaps it, in doing so, is not quite the best and the most efficient way to run on Windows. And Windows has its own preferable APIs to counter the arguments to having Cocoa on the Apple side. I'm not going to get into much more detail about that. I've been asked about, yet again, HTML5 and Flash. I already have a video on that. I'm not going to go over the technology again. It's been hashed. It's a dead horse. The only thing that I will say is that I support Apple and what they want to do, but I disagree with what they do. Okay, and what I mean by that is quite simply, it's great to go in the future and have HTML5 being used and pushing a standard as such. But I'm a person that believes in options. I think that the consumer comes first, and that if the option if it is to give something as ubiquitous as Flash, the option to the consumer needs to be present. And therefore the challenge would be to find a way to have Flash run that is efficient within your system. And many mobile operating systems are beginning to do that, and like manual request to have it there and so on and so forth, and without it using resources automatically. I think that is the better way, in my opinion, is to provide the option, especially with something, again, as ubiquitous as Flash. So it's not the argument of technology, it's the argument of consumer options. I was also asked about the Apple TV. You don't really want my opinion on the Apple TV. I don't have anything good to say about the Apple TV other than, okay, it's $99. But then again, I would never buy the Apple TV. Don't want to ask my opinion of the Apple TV. Can't say that enough. I am a Mac Mini fan. I will swear by the Mac Mini, even against other PC options. I have a 2006 Mac Mini that does like the little engine that could. It takes in HD. It pumps everything out to my receiver. Records my wife's soap operas. Records shows that I also want. It is great for me. I'm not going to bash any other solutions out there, but if it's Apple, Mac Mini is the way to go, in my opinion. You cannot call something anything TV on it if you cannot record TV. If you don't even have a means of having a tuner to project TV, TV does not belong in the name, in my opinion. Period. I was also asked on the Mac App Store. I have not been able to really use it enough to give you a fair opinion. I'm still really running Leopard as my main Apple OS, although I do have Snow Leopard installed on a different bootable drive that I can select. From what I've read, I'm not really too happy with the Mac App Store. There's going to be pros and there's going to be cons, and a lot of it's going to fall on the same restrictions that I argue for the APIs within the iPhone and the game that Apple will play in changing policies and things in that. But I will make a video solely dedicated to the Mac App Store. But as it stands, I'm not really I really don't like what I see so far. That's not to say I won't change my mind. I have been asked several PMs because there has been so many debates on like Mac versus PC. And I want to say just a real quick statement on that. I never really considered myself in the realm of Mac versus PC. I did get into YouTube because I saw so many sound bites getting thrown around and a lot of propaganda and a lot of misinformation getting out there. My approach has always been to educate on technology, and once you know the technology, it speaks for itself, and therefore you can make up your own mind once you know the technology. So I'm not really going to be doing much of this versus match. I really like to say, hey, this is option A or option B. It's not to say that I won't have my usual monologues and rants that I get very passionate about, but it has to do with Mac versus PC in terms of this hardware. There's been all these debates and pricing and things like that. My mantra has been the same. You cannot compare OEM to custom builds. I don't know why people try to do so. I don't think it's a fair thing to do. The majority of people, even in the going on 16 years in the computer world that I've been, 80% buy OEMs. Maybe more than 80%. And the rest are in custom builds. I prefer to custom build myself. I know how to do it. Not everyone does, and everyone's going to go through it. So it's not really fair to even compare a Dell or a Gateway or anything to custom build. You can do so much with a custom build that, yes, you can get more bang for the buck. You can control the efficiency, power, all kinds of things with custom build. At the same time, that's always why I've advocated for licensing out OS X on Apple hardware. My logic always stays consistent. I will defend Apple hardware as far as OEMs go, but I will also defend custom builds as far as that goes in terms of what the perfect world could be, if it were legally possible. I was asked on what do I think about Steve Jobs in this new leave of absence, and that really the question is in its most ultimate point is Apple without Steve Jobs. It's happened before, and I don't blame Apple's failure on Steve Jobs' absence and how it went to bankruptcy. I think the failure started while Jobs was still on board. It was just ideologies that protectionism and things that I will defend, and I'm sure people will love to debate me on, that started the ball rolling. Windows had a different ideology. No matter how bad Windows sucked, it's mythos. It's the way it wanted to conduct business on running on such diverse and multiple platforms really was just unbeatable. No matter how poorly the software may have been executed, or no matter what. I mean, even under Windows 3.1.1, the ball started rolling, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse for Apple. So what does that bring? I don't think Apple will really be that bad off without a Steve Jobs. I think that you're going to have a new flavor and a new charisma to Apple, but I do agree with some YouTubers that there's really a long-term plan for Apple, and I think that they'll be able to execute that. But hey, even without a Steve Jobs, maybe we'll see some of Apple opening up. But I'm probably going to be wrong on that, because when Steve Jobs left Apple, Apple became really even more tight-lipped and closed to a lot of things that I'd like to see as consumer options. But hey, it could go the other way this time around if Steve Jobs leaves, that options begin to open up. And we see Apple finding ways of saying, well, instead of just ruling it out completely, wouldn't it be better to use the Apple magic and find a way to give the consumer an option, but yet keep our ecosystem running smoothly? I'm not really worried about it this time. It's too early to tell. It's really a wait-and-see type of thing. I've been asked about the Verizon iPhone 4. I'm not going to get it. My wife has the iPhone 4 on AT&T, and I must report to say that it drops calls. It's not as bad as my 3G that I had, but man, I can't explain it. Many people argue they have great AT&T service here in Houston, and my friends elsewhere in other cities. It's terrible. I do ask a lot of my friends why they continue to have the iPhone, and they like the other features, and to them it's an opportunity cost. They enjoy so much other things that the iPhone does very, very well that it's not a big deal. Okay, you know, and for many users that's cool. You know, I do the same thing with opportunity cost. I cannot deal with the amount of drop calls that I had on the iPhone. That's primarily why I gave it up, and now my wife experiences that. And I can't explain it. This is an AT&T phone. It's a little piece of, you know, whatever. I don't want to call it junk, but you know, it's not a smartphone. It doesn't drop calls. It's on AT&T network. I see YouTube videos demonstrating the death grip of the Verizon iPhone, and now the antenna is I guess unchanged or something on that. Primarily, I think hopefully Verizon's won't, you know, have drop calls, and I think it's more power to you if you don't have drop calls. It just didn't happen for me. Yeah, and I've moved on since then. As far as Verizon is concerned, though, I will say this: I do miss simultaneous voice and data. But hey, when the voice did work on the AT&T side, it was nice, you know, while having simultaneous data. The real big thing with that, and I'll get into videos about that, was CDMA, and where instead of EVDO, you should have the SVDO for simultaneous voice and data over the CDMA technology. But then we have LTE coming in and all this other stuff. I'm going to have a video definitely covering all of that technology this year. I've been asked to give my opinion of Windows Phone 7. I will likely just go to a store and spend an hour or two looking at it. I have not done so yet. I have a couple friends that have theirs. They're complaining a lot about it. I would say that based upon the limitations that it had on its first release, you know, I couldn't really use it now. And a lot of people make up and say, well, it's this first gen, and Android and iOS had its limitations. That's very true, but that was back in 2007. You're supposed to learn from other people's mistakes with your first release, and then do it. I would cite WebOS with its tablet in getting a lot of things right out of the gate, and other companies that have seen the history and learned from it. I just think that Microsoft had to rush Windows Phone 7. I think that they had lost direction and really needed to try to not waste another year before releasing the Windows Mobile platform, because you're sacrificing a lot. In the meantime, you know, a lot more market share. You become like really a dead issue. So I think Microsoft just said, fine, we'll just release it without these features and just play catch up. To me, I can't really give an excuse to that. And it's just, when you come that late in the game, you have history to say, hey, well, I'm going to learn from what they did wrong and do it right. My opinion. And of course, WebOS. Yes, I am a Palm now HP WebOS fan. It's much like I am with OS 10. You know, I don't really advocate so much of the internals, you know, of hardware much anymore, since it's like really a CISC Intel environment. But I love OS 10. You know, if OS 10 were to leave Apple, I'd follow OS 10. WebOS is going HP. I'm following WebOS. To me, in my opinion, and I will make videos explaining why, I think that WebOS is the top mobile operating system as an operating system. I'm not talking about ecosystems, which encompass everything from apps and the amount of phones and things like that. I'm talking about as a mobile OS as itself. I think it is the best mobile operating system. But I'm glad to be back, and I look forward to seeing you guys on my next video. Thanks for watching.